the Lake County Housing Authority for having us here today. I like to try and keep these as informal as possible. It's an opportunity for me to meet with folks, give them an update of what's going on legislatively at the state level, and then more importantly, hear from you. I want to find out what issues are important to you. I want to find out how you feel about current issues that are transpiring at the state level, and just have an informal dialogue. So I've made just some notes here about some of the things that have been addressed at the state level, and I'll go over and I'll address some issues and questions that I get a lot from residents here in the district, and then open it up and find out if you'd like me to go into more detail about any specific issue or address a specific concern that you might have. So we'll start with just some of the less meaty items first, because I know we've got some meaty items probably towards the end, which a lot of you are going to be interested in. So one of the things that we did in the legislature earlier on was we enhanced our consumer. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. We enhanced our consumer protection laws. As you probably saw on the news, especially around Christmas time and pretty much it turned all year round, there were a lot of data breaches that were taking place. I know Home Depot was hacked and Target was hacked, and it seems like every major retailer these days is exposed to some sort of security breach as it pertains to our personal data. So the Attorney General wanted to go in and take a look at what our current laws are, especially considering the advances in technology we're seeing, and what happens when there is a data breach. In Illinois, didn't really have any solid policies in place as to what the responsibilities were of the entity that was breached in terms of communicating that to the people who would be affected by that. The other thing too is your cell phone data. More and more, we're finding out, I mean, when you think about, especially on our smartphones and Kindles and whatever the case might be, our electronic devices, how much data about us is stored in here. And there really were no laws in place that would provide for protection for the consumers and for the owner in terms of finding out whether someone had hacked into Apple's system, Microsoft's, or Google's systems. So,
tonight in the news, we bring our cell phones.
Right.
We talk about Samsung. They're manufacturing their phones so that, this is just on the news tonight.
Okay.
I heard it 20 minutes ago.
Sure.
They manufacture their phones so that a hacker has more chance of giving a phone call than you do when you're using your phone.
Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting.
And it was manufactured that way.
Okay.
Samsung, within 2 hours, had gotten on the national news media and said they're going to change this.
For sure, yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge problem.
Just tonight that these came out. The phones are manufactured, they've been hacking you as you're using your internet.
Right. And that's a huge problem because the majority of people don't even know they've been hacked until suddenly something shows up on their credit report and they don't understand why they owe all this money to a debt collector because they never made those purchases, or personal information as well. So what we did is we increased what was required to be disclosed to the person who was essentially affected through a data breach, and that has to do a lot with personal data. And it really expanded the current law in Illinois to cover now your mobile devices, your smartphones, and things like that. So that's something that we're going to, in my opinion, that's something that as a state, just as individuals and as a nation, we're always going to have to keep going back to review because our technology is moving at such a rapid pace, and to make sure that we do provide consumers that necessary protection. There's also, and this is an issue that I focused a lot of my time on during the past, probably about the past year. As many of you have probably read in the newspaper, seen on the news, the heroin epidemic that we're facing in this state and across the country. And one of the reasons, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, we've seen a proliferation in heroin usage, especially amongst our young adults, over the past several years. And this is in large part now because heroin it's not the same heroin that you think of back, in the 70s and the 80s that you would have to inject with a needle. Heroin is much more potent now, and it can be consumed in a variety of ways. You don't have to inject it anymore. You can snort it, you can inhale it, you can even ingest it. And so we had a series of different focus groups around the state. I was in charge of the Young Adult Heroin Use Task Force. And I traveled around the state to meet with communities and to meet with law enforcement and specifically to meet with school districts and young adults who have been affected by heroin use, because this is the largest group that is seeing an increase in use. And what I found to be very interesting was a lot of these young adults who are in their teens, some as young as 12, became addicted to opiates, and those are your painkillers. And so for instance, let's say you have a sports injury in high school, and you go to the doctor and this teenager is prescribed, let's say, Vicodin. Well, because Vicodin is such a potent opiate, and along with a lot of other painkillers, these teens were becoming addicted to it. And then when they ran out of access to their own supply, they would turn to medicine cabinets of their parents, their grandparents, friends, and they would start to go through their medicine cabinet. And if you just think about how much medication in general people have just sitting in their medicine cabinet that's unused, or maybe you were prescribed a medication a year ago that you stopped taking, it's just sitting there. So there's a huge abundance and availability of prescription medication available to these youths. So what was happening was once they ran out of access to a lot of these painkillers and other opiates, they would turn to the street to fill that need. And they, let's say they went to a dealer on the street, and the dealer would say, yes, I can sell you this Vicodin pill for $30. However, I can sell you this other thing called heroin, and it's only $5, and it does the same thing. And because of the potency rate in heroin, it instantaneously becomes addictive. And it just, the drug itself takes such a stranglehold on people, and especially our young adults. So as this issue has emerged across our state, we put together, I worked with a variety of other lawmakers from across the state to put together, it was on House Bill 1, and it's essentially the heroin omnibus bill. And it is we're hoping it'll be a model piece of legislation that can be used in other states. And it addresses a myriad of issues that pertain to heroin overdose, starting with working with the medical community to educate and talk about overprescription of pharmaceuticals. So for instance, if a 16-year-old goes in with a sports injury, they don't need to have 30 Vicodin prescribed to them in one sitting. And to work with the medical community to try and taper down how much is being prescribed at any one time, and then to also be a little more vigilant about it. And I know that in working with the medical community, here you have a group of doctors who just want to make people better. They just want to help someone get put back together. So it was a really collaborative discussion with them as to how to meet the needs of the patient while also making sure to avoid any sort of prescription drug abuse. So that was one component of the bill. The other component of the bill was expanding and cutting through and eliminating a lot of red tape for pharmaceutical disposal. So there's a lot of municipalities now around the area. There's a lot of governmental bodies where you can take your unused prescription medication, they will collect it and then properly dispose of it. Lake County has had a great deal of success in terms of pulling unused medication, out of people's homes and off the streets. And they were, actually, the Lake County government was very helpful in working to progress this bill. The other thing too is that it provides additional treatment options for young adults, because right now, what would happen is if you have, let's say you're a teenage kid and you need that heroin, you need that fix, it has such control over your life that everything else is secondary. If I have to break into someone's house to steal something, to get money for my next fix, that is what's most important to me, is to break into someone's house. And it leads to a lot of petty crime, and it ultimately disrupts and destroys a lot of people's lives. So the way our laws were currently structured is, you might be able to get off on probation your first time, but then every other time after that became much harsher. So we found that we were putting a lot of people in jail for heroin usage, when in fact, we weren't necessarily treating the real root issue, which is this addiction. We were just putting people away. And then when they came out of jail and they would go back to using heroin, they were used to taking the same dosage that they took prior to going to jail, where they sobered up. So they would take the dosage they were used to, and then boom, immediately OD, and many of them would die as a result of it. And this is an issue that needed to be addressed. There's a variety of different court systems across the state. Lake County has also been very very effective at dealing with addressing different court cases throughout different court structures, and one of them is a drug court. And what happens in that is a specific court that is set up for drug users, and it is a very, very rigid program. And there's an enormous amount of accountability in it. So if you go to drug court, you are going to have someone watching you every moment to make sure that you're staying clean and to make sure that you're not getting into trouble. But more appropriately, to make sure that you have the support network to move on past your addiction.
Would that be the same city steps?
In a way, yes. It provides counseling. These drug courts provide counseling, and I know NICASA over here in Round Lake, they administer the drug court, so they have access to a lot of resources to help, especially teenagers and young adults get through their addictions. But one of the issues that we were running into is that a lot of the way these drug courts were statutorily structured is that if someone went through a drug court, they passed, and then they got, let's say a couple years down the road, they had a relapse, and they fell back into, let's say, heroin usage or addiction, they would not be eligible to go back to that drug court. So what we did, and I know there are some pros and cons with this, but what we did in the legislation was to allow people to use that drug court again, because the drug courts are successful, and the belief is that these people don't want, they're addicted to a horrible, horrible drug, and it's not an effective use of resources, especially financial resources at the state level, to put them in prison indefinitely. It's more cost effective to help them go through this drug court. So that was something else the legislation did. There's also an antidote to overdosing, and it's called naloxone or Narcan, and it instantaneously will reverse an overdose. So if you have someone here on the floor overdosing from heroin, you can inject them with naloxone, or there's also a nasal spray that you can use, and it will instantaneously stop the overdose, and the person will immediately come back. There were some issues with liability purposes for our first responders to be able to provide that type of treatment. And so in this legislation, it helps mitigate a lot of those liabilities that the police brought to us, fire protection brought to us, paramedics brought to us, saying, we want to help these people, but we need the state to give us some more liability protection into doing this. So that was another main component of the bill. There are several other things in the bill that help just more mechanically with helping record heroin overdoses. Right now, county by county, there's a heroin overdose, let's say in Lake County, or there's a spike in heroin overdoses. There's no centralized system to share that data. So this legislation provided an opportunity for a centralized system to share data by county coroners. So you can look at the data and say, oh my gosh, there's been a sudden spike in heroin overdoses in Lake County across the state. What's going on up there? And that then helps law enforcement too to say, okay, maybe we need to refocus our attention over into this area because for whatever reason, maybe more heroin is being put on the streets. And then it provides our law enforcement our law enforcement with a new tool to be able to help monitor and track that. Another issue that I've been working on a lot in Springfield is government transparency and the need to look at making all of our governments more efficient. There's over 7,000 units of government in the state of Illinois, and we have arguably now more than any other state. We were neck and neck with Pennsylvania for a while, but now we're pretty much the top one. And when you look at all the units of government, and every unit of government has the ability to levy taxes on property or some other form of tax, it obviously drives up the cost of living for a lot of people in our area. And that's something that has been very important to me because we need to reduce the number of units of government we have in the state. 7,000 is way too many. Many of these units of government were created a long time ago and no longer serve a purpose. In many cases, they become redundant and have provided duplicative services. And so what ends up happening is you have multiple units of government essentially doing the same thing, and they all have their own overhead costs, which we pay for. So we passed legislation that, to start with, it just bans the creation of any new governmental body in the state of Illinois. And in doing that then, we also, a couple of years ago, we gave DuPage County the ability, they came to us, DuPage County came to the state and said, we want to be the guinea pig on government consolidation. And we gave them the ability to go through these units of government that the DuPage County Board controls and consolidate them and streamline them. And that was met with a great deal of success. They've been able, they are projected to save tens of millions of dollars in the upcoming years. And when you talk about these units of government, I mean, you obviously are familiar with, your villages, your libraries, your school districts, but there are things like a drainage ditch district, there are things like a street light district, and all of that ultimately costs money. So there's ways to consolidate these into existing units of government to help reduce costs. So due to the success in DuPage, we expanded that law to be able to provide Lake County and McHenry County to do the same thing. So I worked with Representative Jack Franks, he's in McHenry County, to put that together, and it passed out of the House, and right now it's in the Senate, and we were hoping to get that passed by the end of May, but it's in the Senate right now. We're hoping to get that passed, mostly to build off of the huge amount of success that DuPage has had, and that's something that we really need to start looking at. The other, and this goes into an issue that's important to a lot of people I talk to, and that's property taxes. Lake County has amongst the highest property taxes in the state, and there are a variety of reasons for that. And Illinois as a whole has amongst the highest property taxes in the country, and this goes hand in hand with what I was talking about with the number of units of government. But also, too, we have a completely dysfunctional property tax system in our state. In '92, our current property tax system was put into place, and it essentially, it's our current law now, and it says that local governmental bodies cannot raise their tax levies more than consumer price index or 5%, whichever is less. And on paper, it looks like a good piece of public policy, but in reality, it had a lot of unintended consequences. And those unintended consequences were these taxing bodies would just max out their levies every single year. So flash forward 20 years from now, or 20 years now, and you've seen a compounding and exponential effect in increases in property taxes. And so whereas maybe your property tax would have gone up $50, 1 year, it goes up $500. And we've reached a level of unsustainability, especially for our senior community who's living on a fixed income. And just based on our demographics, with the baby boomer population getting older, is that more and more people want to age in place. They want to stay in their homes, they want to stay in their communities, but they can't because our property taxes have gotten completely out of control and they're forcing people from their homes. So there is a lot of discussion right now at the state level, and there's been some bills that have been debated in regards to a property tax freeze. And there are several different proposals, but essentially the principle is this, is that if it goes into effect, the dollar amount that you're paying today in your property taxes is frozen. That's it, it's frozen, and the only way that property tax amount could go up would be if a taxing body on your property tax bill wants to raise their taxes, whether it's $1 or $1 million, they would have to go to the voters and ask them for permission to do that. And this is one of the reasons that I'm a huge advocate of a property tax freeze, is because it puts the property taxpayers back into the equation. Right now, the property taxpayers have almost been completely removed from the equation because these taxing bodies get to automatically increase their taxes each year. And you can go to a meeting, you can say, please don't do it, but they're given that option. They can just hit the money button, and that money's going to come in. But now, they would have to go to the taxpayers and the voters and say, we need X more dollars, we need another $500,000, and this is why we need another $500,000. It would put them in a position where they would have to be able to explain to the property taxpayer why they need that $500,000 and be able to sell it. And I think that when you look at all these units of local government, is that people are going to be, a lot of these boards are going to be reluctant to go to referendum because they're going to be forced to go out in public and say, and to tell each one of you why they need an extra $500,000 and whether or not they can sell that. And I think in large part, it's going to be difficult for them to sell it, and it's going to make them think again that maybe we don't need to increase taxes. So that's something that is being proposed right now. There have been several bills that have been voted on in the House. I voted for every property tax freeze bill that has come up because that is the top issue in our area. We need property tax relief. Too many people are being forced from their homes, and we need to do something about it. So providing a freeze, and again, there are a couple different proposals, some are 3, some are 5 years, some are indefinitely. It would give the legislature time to go back into our current property tax code and say, okay, this part of the code works. This part of the code doesn't work. Let's get rid of it. Let's refine it, and go down the code. And it would allow time to do that in a thoughtful and deliberate manner, as opposed to trying to come up with band-aid solutions year after year after year. The other thing that I hear a lot from folks, especially going back to what I talked about earlier with our population aging and more people wanting to stay in their homes, but they can't afford it because of property taxes, is to look at a scale system for education funding on a property tax basis. There are some states that provide a reduction based on your age as to how much you pay for educational services. I have yet to see a property tax model in another state that actually phases that out altogether, because obviously it's important that we have an educated population. But there are a few different systems that provide for a phase down as to how much people are paying into the education system based upon how old they are. Now that's something that I think the state needs to look at. And I think that's something that could benefit a lot of our community, especially as the population continues to age. Does anyone have any thoughts or any questions about the property tax freeze?
That's what I came for.
Yeah, sure.
My taxes are $6,000
Okay.
on a property that's appraised somewhere around 120.
So you're paying $6,000 on a property assessed or appraised?
That's appraised.
Appraised at $120,000.
I
Okay.
filed my taxes 3 times since I don't fight that one since 93.
Okay.
The reason I don't fight it anymore is because it costs more money to fight it than what the tax is going up.
Sure.
I was laughed at by the judge in the real estate tax collector's office over.
Okay.
It almost comes up in the country.
Sure.
He was so indifferent to me, he should not even have a job. But the thing that's most important to me is that my property value over the last 4 years has increased from 7% to 4 years. Yes, I pay $25 to $40 more each year. And when I do fight it, the judges and the real estate tax office over there, when you ask them about it, they say that percentage that the state raises it at, that's not our fault. Your taxes would have gone down at 7% based on that. But when you go to the state, they tell you there's no avenue to fight that 1% or 2% stalls you put on to keep taxes that should have been my reduced tax rate. It's the state doing it to us more than it is. And they're so indifferent to me about it. I'm thinking about, I'm retired Navy, and I'm thinking about walking away from my property and leaving. I'll walk out of the state of Illinois. I don't give a shit about it anymore. Part of my life, I'm just fed up with the state of Illinois, just taking what they can and not doing anything. I know Ronner's trying to do something about retired government employees now. The very people we hold highest, police, fire, DNR, the other ones getting 100%, and they didn't contribute anything toward their retirement. They get 100% medical, and I could go fight 4 wars and get 50% for 24 years of service. People go out, and I know this for a fact because my wife's stepdad took care of the retirement system. She gave a nice head of the office down the floor. I'm so happy I can talk.
No, that's okay. Don't take that.
And he's one of a watch captain in the police department, making $100,000 a year. Gets out the rest of his damn life. It's ridiculous. The amount of percentages that these people are getting for their retirement without contributing to this, it's just baloney. And the state, every year, just keeps on playing on with it. What's the state doing about it?
In regards to pensions,
The pensions and,
sure. So in 2013, there was a pension overhaul bill.
I don't know about that.
Right. I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. So in 2013, there was a pension overhaul bill that was passed. I voted for it, and its projected savings would have saved us $2 billion alone in this year. And recently, the Illinois Supreme Court struck the entire bill down as being unconstitutional, and this has created an additional headache. And to your point,
And because of the union.
yeah, and this is in the Illinois Constitution in 1970, when the Illinois Constitution was rewritten. There was a clause put in the Constitution that said, forgive me, it essentially says, pension benefits shall not be diminished or impaired. And so the Illinois Supreme Court took that pension reform bill, which was signed into law, and it struck it down, saying that this diminishes or impairs current pensions. And again, that bill alone would have saved the state approximately $2 billion alone this year, plus more moving forward. So now we have to go back to square one and try and come up with a new pension solution, because our pension obligations are pushing out the rest of the budget. And if you just bear with me here for a sec, I can explain how that ultimately affects us here on the lower level. Is right now we pay roughly, the state now has its hands tied because of the Illinois Supreme Court ruling that we have to fund pensions at 100%. And we have to make those payments to everyone who's involved in them. And that now accounts, it's pushing about 20% of our budget. Now in other states, in other states that have pension systems, you could be looking at 7% of the budget goes to pension. We're more than double that now. And in some cases, we're almost triple that. So as the pension obligation grows in the state of Illinois, it pushes out available funds for other things, such as, let's just say, education. So as it pushes out funding for education, the state now can fund education at less and less and less, which then pushes up our property taxes because our school system become more dependent on property tax forms of revenue to be able to operate their school system. So this is a huge issue, and I know it's a very controversial issue, with some people saying that the pension, for a lot of employees who are getting a pension, who say I work for that pension, I own that pension belongs to me, and I can appreciate that. I can truly appreciate that, but we also have to balance in there the fact that the state has reached a point where it just cannot sustain itself, and these pension systems will collapse. So in talking with folks who are receiving a pension and talking about potential reforms, it's important for everyone to understand that having a pension check is great in retirement, but there will come a day when that pension check stops arriving because the funds have no more money in them. And in the meantime, the state has less and less money to spend on other critical services. So I think that I don't think there's going to be any additional pension discussion in 2015. There's a lot of attorneys right now are sorting through the Supreme Court ruling to figure out going into 2016 now what type of pension bill can get passed through the legislature and have the stamp of approval by the Supreme Court. There are a couple options that I've heard people talk about in the legislature in terms of addressing this. One of the options is a constitutional amendment to put on to the ballot, a constitutional amendment that would give the legislature the ability to modify pensions. And there's something that we need to keep in mind with that, is that let's say tomorrow there was a constitutional amendment passed by the legislature to be put on the ballot. The soonest that could be voted on would be 2016, and it would require a supermajority of the voters to pass it. If it got adopted, that constitutional amendment would then be challenged in federal court as being unconstitutional to the federal constitution. So you would be looking at a prolonged legal battle that could take 5 to 10 years. So in the meantime, then what's happening is the state is having to continue to pay this money into the pension system over the next 5 to 10 years. So if that route is utilized, it's important for people to realize that is a long process. You're talking 5 to 10 years for an outcome. The other solution would be to go back and try and come up with a different approach. There was another pension bill that was floated in 2013 that took a different legal approach to the situation that could very quite possibly come back in 2016 to be a solution to our pension issue. The third approach, which I've heard people talk about, and I'm not sure how I feel about this, but the third approach I've heard people talk about is, okay, if the court says that the legislature does not have the ability to modify pensions constitutionally, the Constitution says that the legislature has the constitutional authority to tax, and that is something that I've heard people talk about, and again, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but to essentially tax the pension benefits and take that tax money and put it back into the pension system to help stabilize it. So people who would be receiving a pension would be taxed on that, receiving a public pension would be taxed on that, and then that money in turn would just get rerouted back into the pension system to stabilize it. And that's an option that I've heard floated. That needs to get flushed out a little bit more. So it is definitely, you are absolutely right, it's definitely something that is financially impeding the state from getting back into fiscal health.
Why has this ever been put on the ballot?
In terms of the
Majority
constitutional
rule,
limit.
I would think that would certainly been enforced.
Well, because in the Illinois Constitution, in the Illinois Constitution itself, it says that in order for an amendment to be adopted to the Illinois Constitution, it has to be put onto the ballot by the General Assembly and then approved by the voters. Yeah, so constitutionally, that's what would have to happen. There could be an advisory question, there could be a referendum question that would have no legal bearing or effect. So that,
Majority rule has no legal bearing on that.
well, it does if we're rewriting the Constitution, but
It's voted on, it's voted in. I would think that might become something that's bad.
sure, and that's understandable. I can appreciate
Not
it.
like it's before you.
Yeah, well, I can appreciate the standpoint on that. But again, is that the governing document of the state is the Illinois Constitution, and in that it says that in order to make any sort of amendment to that Constitution, it has to be put on question, or amendment has to be put on the ballot by the General Assembly and then voted on by the public and receive supermajority of the public vote. The only other option in terms of changing the Constitution is a constitutional convention, which was up, I believe, for a vote in 2010, and the overwhelming majority of people in Illinois voted, said, no, we do not want to have a constitutional convention. We're happy with the way the Constitution is. And so that is also something that's in the Constitution. What is that?
Should be that way, for the money matter.
So does anyone else have any thoughts about the pension issue? Is anyone receiving a public pension? Okay. So that's definitely something that we need to look at, and that goes into our budgetary issues that we're facing right now. As you probably read on the news or read in the paper, seen on the news, the state right now is trying to come up with a budget, and there have been two proposals. In his financial address to the legislature, the governor proposed a budget that would that when everything was said and done, there would still be about a $4 billion deficit in that budget based upon what our projected revenue is. The legislature passed a budget that has a $3 billion deficit, which in large part I did not vote for because I don't believe that we should be sending an unbalanced budget to the governor. So right now the governor has a budget that is $3 billion, which spends $3 billion more than the state is projected to take in. And again, that's one of the reasons that I didn't support that, is because we need to have a balanced approach here. But this goes to a question that I'd like to get as many opinions on as possible, because this is an issue that is going to have to be addressed. So when the temporary income tax expired, that income tax I think was passed in 09 or 10, and it increased our income tax to 5%. It has since expired. It's down to 3.75% now. So as a result of the expiration of that income tax, there's $6 billion, the state lost $6 billion in revenue as a result of that. So now the state has three options to raise $6 billion, and really the only way you can raise $6 billion is to reinstate that tax, to move the income tax back to 5%. The second option is to cut $6 billion. And when you're looking at cutting $6 billion, really where the two areas that you're going to be able to cut $6 billion out of is going to be the education funds and the human services funds. So when we're talking about cutting education funding, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, is that if the state provides less money to our local schools, it makes them more reliant on property taxes, then it just kind of pushes the cost into a different direction. The other option is to cut human services. And human services, some of the programs in human services, for instance, provides in-home care to seniors who can live on their own, but need maybe someone to come in a couple times a week to prepare some meals or check in on them. It helps families that have children with special needs, specifically autism is one of them. So if money is cut out of there, you're looking at affecting people who have mental health conditions, and really the senior community is in large part going to be most affected by a cut in human services. The third option is to come up with some type of mixture of the two, and that would be to cut $3 billion and to find $3 billion in revenue. Does anyone have any specific thoughts as to, out of those three options, maybe which ones they would favor? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I would like to see people that have had a handicap, bipolar and depressive, but they can function, get jobs. They don't have to go into the system. There are programs that work education. Instead of just retiring at 60 or whatever it is, they can go and still be successful at what they do in their living and contribute back instead of just taking.
So I'm sorry. Can you just re-explain that? So for folks that are
people, like I had like children, like go to school where I worked, or a workshop, a design. The children would have disabilities, but they had a job where they earned their own income and help them out in their living situations. I would just like to see more jobs, people who help themselves get a little bit better established.
So you would like to see the state
More
provide
education, to help them get on their feet.
Sure, and there's a lot of programs right now that the state provides in that regard that would be cut. Yeah, if you're looking at making $6 billion or any types of cuts, I mean those would be some of the programs that would be cut. So, does anyone else have any thoughts on? Yeah.
Why is it our state and property worse than why do they focus on finding out the necessary things like the senior services and things where the majority of seniors have contributed most of their lives and they're the people that now have to fight for it, where there's other people not necessarily. The immigration problem is a big problem, but the seniors are the ones that are suffering for it. I've been a caregiver for many years and I've seen how people suffer and they have to cut out of government programs, telling them that they're not necessary. I've had people that have been
So you would like to see seniors be more informed about what services are available to them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Even as far as the tax exemptions, I mean, there's a senior that been owning the house for 60 years, and just by looking at tax records, you know that this person's been in here, why can't they make like the tax exemptions automatic?
Right.
I know a lot of people, they get the things in the mail, they look at it, and they just throw it away. They never think, they never fill it out, they have no idea that that would qualify them for tax freeze, and they're paying behind or something.
Right. And that's a very valid point. There's, especially as it comes to assessments and freezes. I had a meeting with a gentleman earlier today at my office, and he had come in to talk about, he was in a situation where he's in his mid-70s, and his property tax bill was about $7,000. And we were talking about, his different options. And I asked him, I said, have you applied for the senior freeze? And he says, I make about $100 too much. And that is something that is really a travesty because you shouldn't be excluded from having access to some type of property tax or financial relief because you make an extra $100. And there's so many people who will say, if they're told they make too much money, well, they say, all right, fine, I'll come back and have time then. And that's not productive. You're absolutely right. We do need to make a better effort to notify seniors about the different services that are available.
I think you're asking to freeze your taxes. Only letting out. Because my reasoning being is that I asked about that in my term decision too.
Okay.
And at the time, my taxes were something like $5,500.
Okay.
And their favor to me was my taxes would be frozen at $7,800.
You're talking about the freeze?
Right?
Yeah.
No, that's what they would freeze that's what my taxes would be the rest of my time on earth here.
So basically they told you that they would freeze your taxes at a higher rate.
At a higher rate, $1,500 a year.
So
That's pretty pathetic.
well, yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. And there's and this is and I don't mean to belabor the point on the state property tax freeze, but that's one of the reasons that I strongly favor that is because it would override anyone's ability to raise it, with the exception of the voters if they vote to increase it. And that's something that I think is important, especially too when you look at a lot of businesses too in the area. I mean, businesses, you have a lot of small business owners, and they're paying out more and more and more and more in property taxes, and their businesses can't keep up with it. Their profit margins are getting less and less and less, which means that they can't hire as many people, they can't make capital investments into their business. And that's something, and when you think about a lot of local businesses, just think about what's around us here. You have local businesses that employ people who live in the community. And they in turn want to make sure that the community is well maintained. They're going to reinvest in that community. They're going to spend their money in that local community. But as we start to face more of a greater property tax burden just for our small mom and pop businesses, is they can't afford to hire more people, more of our local residents, people who live right here in this neighborhood. And then that ultimately has a detrimental impact on our local economy. So when we talk about property tax freezes, I think that, and I'm sorry, I should have said this earlier, but I think this would affect everyone, and I think that would give a little bit of a breather to not only our homeowners but also businesses. I notice here that we're getting close to the end of time, and I don't want to take up any more of your time on a Friday night. So why don't I just do this? Does anyone have questions or issues that maybe were not discussed that I can answer or address?
Can we fight do we have an option to fight the percentage that the state raises our taxes after?
So you're talking about the state equalizer? So the state equalizer, this is one of the problems with how dysfunctional our current property tax system is. The state equalizer is put into the state property tax code. So the best way, and this is really this is the best way to fight. Unfortunately, I'm going to be honest with you, there's little you can do because that's how the code's written. And that's why, again, I'm advocating for a property tax freeze, because we need time to go in there and fix those parts of the code. When you contest your assessment, you go through the process, you were saying you have a appraised value of about 120,000, is that right?
Oh, that's, I'm not doing right now.
Okay.
But the state holds it around 259,000. That's how pathetic they were.
Okay, then that's something.
They're not even close to valuing.
What, let me do this. Why don't we, let's talk offline here, and we can talk about your specific situation and see what we can do to help you with that, because something doesn't seem right there. It seems to be off, and maybe you're reading this information, but let's talk offline, and we can try and come up with some sort of resolution. Does that sound right? Okay. Does anyone else have any issues or concerns that maybe were not discussed, or questions I can answer?
Sam, let me give you a couple of things.
Yeah, please.
My name is Tom Christoph. A couple of things that happened recently. I tried putting some youth to work through some of the structured programs here in Lake County where the kids could, instead of being incarcerated, work in local businesses and that. And I find that a big problem in the state was paying for the programs, wanting to put kids to work, but for example, some work in my establishment, we couldn't get them insured. As an example, our workers' comp, we have to cover them, even though we were paying them, and then our workers' comp insurance was not actually insured, and they allowed them to cover.
Is there a reason, do they have a reason why, or?
Because we're not paying. And then
Got it. Okay,
They
got it.
had certain rules and regulations of the
Okay.
programs. It was with the youth advocacy. And,
Was that done for the county?
right.
Okay. All right. Now, did the county have, it's my understanding, the county's work comp policy would cover them. Is that inaccurate?
They would not.
Okay.
They would not cover.
Okay.
They wanted the actual business to cover. And then when we began to put these kids to work, which we couldn't, because we could not get it covered. Because we were actually
Thank you for letting me know about that. I didn't realize that. I thought they were covering the county.
paying for that.
Okay, thank you. We need to look into that.
It's a serious problem.
Yeah.
The youth program, which we were trying to put kids to work,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it's given an opportunity to train, and then we're not qualified for the program.
Okay. Thank you. We'll look into that. Are there any other issues that affect you? I mean, Tom is a small business owner here in town, and he's lived in, gosh, how long? I was going to say 41 years. So you've seen an awful lot in your time here.
The changes here have been tremendous, but some of the things that I've actually gotten involved with, I heard you talking a little bit when I came in about utilities. Utility programs today, most people are not aware that you have a choice because Commonwealth Edison has been in monopoly for so long. There are now new laws that have been brought in, new laws that come in to allow people just like you and I to not only save money, but some people can earn incomes by just acquiring other customers for a company that I actually brought on board. I was doing telemarketing daily for me to switch my utilities with I use an example, it's $3,700 electric bill on a monthly basis. And because of that outrageous electric bill, we had to look at ways to save money. I actually found a company, literally the name is called Gambit. They're looking for people here in Illinois that currently have ComEd so that they can save money. One of the functions of this is bringing this to the seniors and bringing it more exposure. I actually, at one point, I'd like to do a presentation here in actually Beach Haven through the Housing Authority, so that the Housing Authority has the ability to help everybody in this building save money, and at the same time, making sure that they're not getting overcharged for these buildings. Like I said, there's less than 1% of the population even knows that they can save and have choice, so it's really important to inform. One of the biggest things is that there's so many seniors today that don't have enough income. The state's not going to take care of this. I'm not yet 65 yet, I'm 64, but I'm fortunate. I have a business and I've worked hard for 41 years, but I'm trying to help and give back to the people. Bringing savings is really important. We've actually run into the other senior center up off behind the bank at Wellington, is Cedar Lake. Done a presentation example, if you had, a $50 electric bill, you may save $5 a month, but multiply that times 12, that's a 1 month savings. So if you can save a 1 month, utility bill, it's a tremendous savings. So, at some point, I'm actually going to talk to the State County Housing Authority here to do a presentation for everybody, do a welcome program, and I wanted to make sure that I talk to you about making more people aware of your community. Even going with you from location to location to inform seniors, not just seniors, but everyone, to help them save on their utilities.
Do you remember what year it was deregulated?
2006.
So in 2006, the state of Illinois deregulated its energy market, and that's what. And so what Tom is saying is now you have an option as to who you consume your energy through, and Ambit is one of the companies.
There's quite a few. The good thing is this company is probably the fastest growing privately held company in the United States. They're based out of Texas. Texas was the first state that we deregulated. There's about 14 currently, 36 more to go. The opportunities in all these states are so that the big monopoly is no longer. They've kept generation, they keep the generation plants, they've kept the lines and the poles and all the workmen, but they've had to give up the actual electricity itself, and that's the secondary market, and that's how you can save money. So it's really important for you to know that.
I don't know that we as individuals can choose for our electricity
See, the building did, Round Lake Beach actually had a conglomerate that came in here to put together, but those have been broken up now. Those companies that were put together weren't able, and they weren't funded enough, so they weren't able to keep their rates low enough that were really a benefit to the community. So now most of those consumers have gone back to Canada and are now paying higher rates.
It has something to do with the two people walking around wanting to look at their electric bills, as a comparison.
Well, there possibly could. I mean, there's quite a few companies that are in these secondary providers today. One of the good things is I do a presentation at Christop's on Sundays. Unfortunately, not this Sunday, but we do presentations there to help people, understand how their bills can be reduced.
The thing on the news, though, that you don't want to show your electric bill, got that in a month or so.
Well, here's the thing, is you need to have somebody that you can trust. And I'll use an example. I put my 41-year reputation on the line to assist people to learn and really give them more information. It's about choice today. You can have your bills evaluated without giving them your actual registration number. Your registration number is what controls who gets your utility. If you don't ever give them that number, then you're really not at risk. The important factor is you don't ever want to be slammed or have anybody take that number and then change your utility for you without your permission. Here in Illinois, there's third-party verification, so you need to understand that if you're going to switch in with the company, and when you make a choice, then make sure that you're using third-party verification that says, I, Tom Christoph, am wanting to switch to Canada or wanting to switch to whoever, and make sure that third-party verification is recorded and validated. That's really important.
The other part, though, is that even though I was paying like $5 for electricity, I was still paying ComEd another $20 to deliver.
Yes, there are multiple portions of the electric bill when deregulation happens. Deregulation as ComEd still has to get their taxes, and they also have to get a delivery charge. The actual power itself is what you can save money on, although the kilowatts can be substantial in price per kilowatt. So you really need to help by somebody training or somebody that has the knowledge on what the kilowatt rates are, so that you're not getting in a situation where a company is underfunded and then switch you and then at some later month or two raise your bill. And that did happen in some cases.
I think it was Texas that had two things going on regarding what you're talking about. One was that they were coming in and bill was so outrageous that, well, they came in and recalculated, it's still a lot of $120 a month.
ComEd now has been really regulated here in Illinois. The Citizens Utility Board is a huge advocate to make sure that they're not gouging the consumer. Here in Illinois, the CUB, which they call it Citizens Utility Board, is the overseeing watchdog. They really keep control. There are listings of the secondary providers also, so you can literally have them provide where they're at in the ratings.
Well, that was the other issue that Texas had going on, was that they come in and put in a meter in the bill where you're going through which one to use. That's been many years ago.
Accessing that is pretty easy. If you have access to the internet here, or if you have a computer at home, being able to go on the CUB Citizens Utility Board website, that's one way. And they have listings of companies. Ambit is listed there. I could actually give you, names of quite a few, but it just wouldn't be good for me to, talk about another company. But all of those are ranked. If anybody would like my card later, I can, totally give you that and give you information. My cell phone is there. Absolutely, yes you can. It's gas and electricity.
So why don't we do this? Let's informally adjourn, and I'm happy to stay around and answer any questions or talk with anyone individually. And I really want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your evening to join me. This helps me do my job a lot better, hearing from you. It's important that I have an understanding of what people in the district are feeling and what their thoughts are. So thank you again for attending, and all of my contact information is up front there. So if anything comes up or you think about any issue that's important to you or have any questions, please call me, email me, stop by my office. So sure.
I know there's a lot of issues that we probably have to address.
Sure.
As far as senior services and healthcare. Would you be willing to come out and talk to us again as someone already?
Oh, absolutely. I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. And
A lot of us have a lot of questions
we can even tailor the meeting to address those specific issues. So does that sound all right? Great. Well, thank you again, everyone. I really appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend. Oh, did you fill